The lantern glass was still warm when my father set it down between us, and I remember the small click it made against the kitchen table. Outside, sleet tapped against the window. Inside, my wife was upstairs with our youngest child, trying to settle a fever that had kept us awake for 3 nights. My father looked at me across that table and said, "A husband must take his place." He spoke quietly. He always did when he meant something. But that night, those words did not steady me. They split something open, and for a long while I did not know how to put it back together. My name is Jonas. I am a husband, a father, and the head of a household in an old order Amish community. I share these stories because there are parts of our life that can look simple from the outside, but inside a home, simple does not always mean easy. If you have ever felt the weight of being told what your place should be, I would be interested to hear what that meant in your own life. I was 37 that winter. We had 4 children then, 3 boys and a girl, and the youngest was 5. Our farm was not large. We kept 14 milk cows, 2 work horses, a few laying hens, and enough ground for hay, corn, and a vegetable garden that carried us through most of the year. I also did cabinet work in a small shop behind the barn. The farm paid some bills. The shop paid the rest. That year had been wet from spring onward. We lost part of the first hay cutting. The corn stood thin in 2 fields, and one of our best cows went down after calving. By November, I was counting every dollar before I spent it. I had begun waking before the alarm, not because I was rested, but because my mind had already started listing what could go wrong. Then our youngest boy, Samuel, became sick. At first, it looked like an ordinary cold. He coughed at supper and said his throat hurt. By the next evening, he had a fever of 103. We used the remedies we knew, and my wife Miriam sat beside him through the night with a damp cloth and a bowl of water. On the 3rd morning, his breathing had changed. It was faster, shallower, and there was a small pulling at the base of his throat each time he drew air. That sound still comes back to me, not loud, just wrong. The nearest clinic was more than 12 miles away. We did not have a telephone in the house, so I walked through freezing rain to our neighbor's place and called from the phone booth in his shop. The nurse said to bring Samuel in. I hitched the buggy, wrapped him in 2 quilts, and took Miriam with me. The road was rough with frozen ruts, and each jolt made him whimper. At the clinic, the doctor listened to his chest and told us it was pneumonia. He needed medicine, rest, and watching. He also said that if Samuel's breathing worsened, we should take him to the hospital. We returned home after dark with a bottle of antibiotics and instructions folded into my coat pocket. For 2 days, Samuel did not improve. Miriam barely slept. I kept doing the morning milking, the evening milking, and what cabinet work I could manage between. I told myself that was what a man did. The cows did not stop needing feed because a child was ill. The orders in the shop did not disappear because my wife had not slept. But beneath all of that, I was afraid. I was afraid of losing my son. I was afraid of the hospital bill. I was afraid of falling behind with customers. And, though I would not have admitted it then, I was afraid that if I stopped moving, everyone would see that I did not know what to do. On the 6th evening, my father came by. He lived less than a mile away and had heard from a neighbor that Samuel was still sick. My father was 68 then. He had raised 7 children, buried 1 in infancy, survived 2 bad farm accidents, and carried himself like a man who had learned not to waste words. He found me in the kitchen with a ledger open in front of me. I had been adding the same column 3 times and getting 3 different answers. Miriam was upstairs. The other children were asleep. My father took off his black hat, shook the sleet from his shoulders, and sat across from me. He asked about Samuel. I said the fever was a little lower. I said the doctor had given medicine. I said we were managing. Then he looked at the ledger. He asked why I was doing accounts at 10 o'clock at night. I told him the shop orders were behind and that I had to know whether I could afford another visit to the doctor. He sat quiet for a moment. Then he said, "A husband must take his place." I knew what he meant, or at least I thought I did. In our way of life, a husband is expected to carry responsibility. He provides. He makes decisions. He protects the order of the home. He does not hand his burden to his wife. My father had lived that way. His father had lived that way. I had tried to live that way too. But that night, those words landed on me like another sack added to a wagon already sinking in mud. I asked him what place he thought I had not taken. My voice was sharper than it should have been. He did not answer at once. I told him I was milking, working, paying bills, taking Samuel to the clinic, and keeping the older children quiet so Miriam could rest. I asked what else a husband was supposed to do. My father looked toward the ceiling, where we could hear Samuel cough. Then he said one sentence, "Your place is beside them, not above them." That was all. He did not raise his voice. He did not explain. But something in me broke. Not because he had accused me, but because I understood him. I had been treating responsibility as if it meant standing alone. I had turned my fear into silence and called it strength. I had watched Miriam carry our sick boy through 6 nights, while I kept telling myself that my job was to keep the rest of life moving. I had not asked what she needed. I had not told her what I feared. I had not even sat beside my own son for more than a few minutes at a time, because sitting still made me feel helpless. I closed the ledger. My hands were shaking. My father saw it, but he did not look away. I remember feeling ashamed, then angry, then suddenly tired in a way I had never known. I had spent years building an idea of myself as the one who could bear whatever came. That idea had made me useful in many hard seasons, but it had also made me proud. I had confused being needed with needing no one. My father rose from the table and put his coat back on. Before he left, he told me he would milk in the morning. I started to refuse. He said nothing. He only looked at me until I stopped. Then he went home through the sleet. I climbed the stairs. The room smelled of sweat, lamp oil, and the sharp medicine from the bottle on the washstand. Samuel was asleep on his side, breathing too fast. Miriam sat in a chair with her head against the wall. Her eyes were open, but only just. I knelt beside her and said I would sit with him. She told me I had chores. I said my father would handle the morning milking. She stared at me because I had never allowed that before, not unless I was injured. Then I told her I was frightened. Those were the hardest words I had spoken in years. I did not say them well. My throat tightened, and I had to look at the floor. I told her I was afraid Samuel would get worse. I told her I did not know how we would pay for the hospital if it came to that. I told her I had been hiding in the work because work was something I understood. Miriam reached down and put her hand on the back of my neck. She did not tell me everything would be fine. She only said, "Then we will be frightened together." I sat beside Samuel until morning. Around 2, his fever rose again. At 3, his breathing became rougher. By 3:30, we decided to take him to the hospital. There was no speech and no debate about who had the final word. Miriam gathered clothes and the medicine. I woke my oldest son and told him grandfather would come. Then I hitched the horse in the dark while ice cracked under my boots. We reached the hospital before sunrise. Samuel stayed there for 2 nights. The medicine began working, and by the second afternoon his breathing had eased. He came home weak, pale, and hungry for toast. The bill was more than I had feared. Our community helped, as it often does. My father sold a small stack of lumber he had been saving and brought me the money without asking whether I wanted it. I took it. That mattered too. Samuel recovered. Within a month, he was following me to the barn again, dragging a little wooden pail and asking questions before I had answered the last one. Life moved on, but I did not return to the same place inside myself. For a time, I felt as though my father's words had taken something from me. I no longer felt certain about what it meant to lead my home. Decisions that had once seemed simple now made me pause. I began asking Miriam what she saw before I told her what I had decided. I let my sons see me admit when I was wrong. I accepted help before I had reached the point of collapse. None of that came naturally. There were days I missed the old certainty, even though much of it had been false. A man can become attached to the armor that is hurting him. My father and I did not speak about that night for nearly 3 years. Then, one summer afternoon, we were repairing a fence after a storm. The heat was heavy, and the posts smelled of wet cedar. I asked him why he had said what he said. He leaned on the post driver and told me that when my older brother died as an infant, he had done exactly what I was doing. He worked. He stayed quiet. He left my mother alone with grief because he believed his place was to keep the farm standing. He said it took him many years to understand what that cost them both. He had not been speaking down to me that night. He had been trying to stop me from becoming the man he had once been. I think about that often now. There are things fathers teach their sons by example, and there are things they teach by finally admitting where their example failed. My father gave me both. The older I become, the more I understand that taking your place as a husband does not mean placing yourself at the center of the home. It means being present where the weight is. Sometimes that is in the barn before daylight. Sometimes it is at the workbench earning what the family needs. Sometimes it is making a decision no one else wants to make. But sometimes your place is in a dark bedroom beside a sick child, telling your wife the truth about your fear. Sometimes it is receiving help with open hands. Sometimes it is stepping down from the idea that leadership means never bending. That night broke something in me, but what broke was not the part I needed most. It broke the hard belief that I had to stand apart in order to stand strong. I have not always lived the lesson well. I still become quiet when I am worried. I still reach for work when I do not know what to say. But Miriam knows me better now, and I let her. My children have seen that a father can carry responsibility without pretending he carries it alone. That is the place I try to take today. Not above them, not ahead of them at every moment, beside them, especially when the road is hard. If these stories from inside Amish family life mean something to you, you are welcome to subscribe. I will keep sharing them as honestly as I can. And I would like to ask you this. When you were growing up, what did the words "take your place" mean in your home? And has that meaning changed for you with time?